Hello and welcome to the Rob Burgess Show. I am of course your host Rob Burgess. On this, our 155th episode, our returning guest is Jason Stanley. You first heard Jason Stanley on episodes 122 and 145 of the podcast. Jason Stanley is the Jacob Urowsky Professor of Philosophy at Yale University. Before coming to Yale in 2013, he was Distinguished Professor in the Department of Philosophy at Rutgers University. Stanley is the author of Know-How, Languages in Context, and Knowledge and Practical Interests, which won the 2007 American Philosophical Association Book Prize, and How Propaganda Works, which won the 2016 PROSE Award for Philosophy from the Association of American Publishers. His first book, Knowledge and Practical Interests, won the American Philosophical Association Book Prize, awarded to one philosopher every year, for 2005 and 2006. He is a frequent contributor to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Review, and the Chronicle of Higher Education, among other publications. Stanley lives in New Haven, Connecticut with his family. His book, How Fascism Works, The Politics of Us and Them, was released September 4th, 2018. We started the conversation talking about the recently signed executive order by President Trump regarding anti-Semitism.
The executive order says that Title VI protections will be extended to Jewish people on the basis of their ethnicity, roughly speaking. So it's been misreported as saying Jews are a nation. It doesn't quite do that, but it rightly, in my view, is that Jewish people are not just a religion. It's a protected identity, and that part of the order, the executive order, is, I think, kosher. But what's less than kosher is the definition of anti-Semitism that it's embracing. The definition of anti-Semitism is very vague. It's the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, and what it does is it gives us examples. It gives us examples. Speech that can be considered critical of Israel. So, for example, it says that it's anti-Semitic to deny the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g., by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor. So if you look at that and you consider perfectly legitimate political speech about the policies of the state of Israel, or you look at perfectly legitimate political critiques of the project of Zionism, it declares those critiques and debates civil rights violations. Now, that doesn't mean that they're illegal, but what it means is that it would be a on-campus Title VI violation, and so it would be against campus regulations, and federal funding would be threatened.
Yeah, and I feel like it's one of those things where under any other administration, maybe you wouldn't look at it sideways, but there's nothing good that's going to come out of this with these people in power.
Well, I think even the Obama administration was considering a version of this legislation, and the part of the legislation that considers Jewish people something like an ethnicity, although problematic in various ways, I think is legitimate. I think there are many non-religious Jewish people that are subject to anti-Semitism. But the problem here is the underlying definition of anti-Semitism, which is vague, and if it were followed in a non-vague way might be okay. But as it stands, it looks like, Palestinians or Palestinian Americans or their supporters who argued that there should be one state there that was binational and was not officially a Jewish state. It looks like that position could be, on some construals of this definition of anti-Semitism. And that position is one that many Jewish intellectuals have held over the 20th century. Many Jewish intellectuals have been critical of Zionism. Hannah Arendt was critical of Zionism. Victor Klemperer, the great scholar of Nazism, a German Jew who survived the World War II, has a chapter in Language of the Third Reich, his great work on Nazi language, that argues that National Socialist ideology is indebted to the Zionist way of thinking of the Jewish people. So as a distinct group, as a nation unto itself. So there's a lot of people, there's a lot of indeed original Zionists who would have critiqued the idea that Israel is first and foremost a Jewish state rather than a secular liberal state.
Yeah, well, it seems like their desire to conflate the two is pretty strong, though. That seems to be the line that they're taking. There's no daylight in their mind between criticism of Israel. And Jared Kushner came out and said that in an op-ed in the New York Times just recently. He said basically anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, like straight up. So,
which makes a lot of Jewish intellectuals in the 20th century and debates about Zionism. It makes the Arendt Gershom Scholem debate a debate between an anti-Semite and and a non-anti, and we Jewish people have always disagreed with each other. And I'm a Zionist of sorts. I'm a Zionist socialist, but I believe there should be no state based on religious belief, or no state that's connected by its nature to a religion. I'm a liberal. That position could be anti-Semitism is perplexing to me. After all, Nazi propaganda declares that liberalism is Jewish. So, it was the liberals, the leftists, the liberals, the universalists, the globalists who were the Jews. And now, supposedly, people who are, it's anti-Semitic not to be a nationalist of a certain variety. So it's very complex to explain to Americans unfamiliar with this history. It's a very political move if the EO is used, if the executive order is used in the way that one fears, because it will quash legitimate political debate, and it will quash, talk about self-determination. If you go for people having, if you go for the idea that a group of people should be able to self-determine, then presumably Palestinians should be able to do that as well.
Yeah, exactly. But it's frustrating to see from the outside these Orthodox or conservative Jews, I guess, that do support Trump because, like you said, there is a history here, and you're taught, I would assume from a very young age, about look out for this in the future because it's been happening for a long time, and to not see the parallels, at least, somewhat, is frustrating to me because, like in his speech, he called them bad people. I think some people laughed maybe because they didn't know what else to do, but he used stereotypes, but he was like using it in the hey money, right?
Yeah, I think he thinks that he's praising his audience.
Yeah, right. I thought he was giving a compliment.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So that's just Trump. So I don't think Trump is. The things anti-Semitism is a very complicated thing. He uses many anti-Semitic stereotypes. He uses some of the worst anti-Semitic stereotypes. Jews as money-grubbing, greedy people. Yeah. But for some reason he does not regard that as a negative. So but he also is using Israel to support his general nationalist philosophy. There's different varieties of Zionism, and not all varieties of Zionism, in fact, most varieties of Zionism are not ethno-nationalist, but Trump is supporting a certain kind of, there's a certain view of Israel, and among the Israeli right, that it is a certain kind of ultranationalist project, and that's the kind of ultranationalism that Trump sees himself as embodying. And so, like, for instance, white supremacist websites like Crosscurrents, which praise Yoram Hazony's work, Yoram Hazony is an Israeli scholar who argues for nationalism, and he set up the National Conservatives Conference here to try to sort of reverse engineer a philosophy for Trumpism. So you have the Israeli right and the American right linking up under a certain version of extreme nationalism. And so that's going on as well. So you have Christian evangelicals here who want to see the United States as a Christian nation, and so if Israel's a Jewish nation, why can't the United States be a Christian nation?
Yeah, well, it almost reminds me of there's a little bit of overlap, I feel like, in like far white supremacist ideology and super black nationalist in a certain way, because it's
Absolutely.
like you had this crossover where they both kind of want to be in their separate places, and they're both kind of fine with that. And that's, they have very different goals and ways of getting about it. I don't mean to compare them in any other way, really, but I just mean that they both have kind of the same vision, just a separate place.
Louis Farrakhan is a far right-wing ultranationalist.
Right.
He's anti-feminist, he's homophobic, he's anti-Semitic. He is all the things that he is far right. There's plenty of far right nationalism, black nationalism, and there's far right Israeli nationalism, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
So all these nationalist movements will link up, and there will be, I predict, black support among black nationalists for Trump. Just as there is, right. I mean, there's these different nationalist movements want different nations to succeed, but they each other on the nationalism. So that's what's happening in the world, and that's why a certain vision of Israel, not the vision that I favor, is gaining currents in this alliance, which is the ultranationalist vision of Israel, the Jewish nationalist vision of Israel, which accords with the Christian nationalist vision of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, it's just amazing to see that's going on over the world, really. I mean, we can talk a little bit about what's happening in India as well. What's happening in India? It's another thing I wanted to talk to you about.
So that there you have maybe the most frightening situation in the world, certainly one of them up there with China. But what's happening in India is is Modi, who's a Hindu nationalist, has in the 2019 elections, his party, BJP, has consolidated complete power in the country. And you have a majority of the residents of India, the voting residents of India, supporting a vicious kind of Hindu nationalism that has as its goal the demonization and ultimate second-class citizenship push for Muslim residents of India. So you have the BJP is the political wing of RSS, which was a Hindu fascist party directly influenced by National Socialism and Mussolini. And BJP were Hindu nationalists in the 1990s, considered very extreme. The movement really started when a mosque was burned on December 6, 1992, by Hindu nationalists in a BJP organized demonstration that turned violent, and that because they claimed that this was a sacred Hindu place where the mosque was located, and the Hindu nationalists have since 1992 just as really we've seen in the United States more rapidly, consolidated power and support to the point where by 2019 they're gathering votes even from the lower class Hindus who should not be supporting an ideology that is committed to the caste system in the first place. So most worrisomely and alarmingly is this move to denationalize Muslims. So you always have to watch out for statelessness, because before you're going to brutalize a population, you render them stateless, because if they're stateless, as Arendt warned us long ago, you can do anything to them because you don't have responsibility for them. So that's what's happening, and there's two mechanisms they're using. They're having, for the first time, a national registry of citizens that is tasked with counting the true citizens of India. And to get on that, to be classified as a citizen, you need to have proof of long-term residency, and certain paper documentation is required. And many, many Indian residents lack any such documentation. So millions and millions and millions of Indian residents will not qualify as citizens. So simultaneously, while they're doing this, they passed a bill called the Citizenship Amendment Bill, CAB. CAB provides a fast track to citizenship for all non-Muslim illegal immigrants. So if you put these two things together, what you see is that Hindus without papers will be able to claim that they're non-Muslim immigrants and get a fast track to citizenship. Muslims without papers will not have any fast track to citizenship, will be detained in the huge detention camps India is now building, and ultimately deported.
Yeah, it's pretty dark, and it's got a history, of course, with fascists in the past. This is how you, like you said, this is how you get people to be victims, because they don't have a state. They don't have any organization that, I mean, look at the Kurds, look at,
The Rohingya in Myanmar are the example that India is really looking at. It's a neighboring state. The Rohingya were always stateless. They lived for a long time in Rakhine province, but they were always stateless. Officially stateless. They didn't have an official status, and Burma and then Myanmar kept them that way. And then one day in 2012, they were declared all Bangladeshi illegal immigrants, and put in, basically imprisoned in their villages. And then in 2017, there was massive ethnic cleansing, if not genocide, justified on the basis that they aren't really residents. And this is the model India, I fear, is looking at.
Right, people are saying this is like the end of Gandhi's version of India, because it's, that was his revolution, was taking that, system away of, classification like that. So it's very upsetting to see it go the other direction, because you think it's like the long arm of justice or whatever, but it's really like, well, sometimes it bends the other way too. It's just bend one way. So.
We Americans know that. We had Reconstruction here, 10 years where Black Americans could vote, and I grew up hearing about, will this be the first Black congressman from the South since Reconstruction? So it's baked into the way we think as Americans that there was this period of time, Reconstruction, where we know that there were Black congressmen and even Black senators, but I think there was a Black senator. I'll have to look that up. We have those phrases like first congressman for since Reconstruction. We know that, so we know things can go backwards here. That's not a mystery to us. And in India, unfortunately, what we're seeing is we're seeing patterns from the past that are deeply concerning. For instance, we're seeing the institutions become nationalized in a transformation that that in German history we call Gleichschaltung, where the institutions became Nazified. Here we're seeing the institutions of a great secular liberal country, India, becoming Hindu nationalist institutions. It looks like that's happening with the Supreme Court. And of course we have to worry with something parallel here as our courts become stacked with Trump loyalists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's once again the evangelical right, again, the super religious people taking Trump, what do they say, not seriously, but literally, or literally not seriously. I don't remember which it was, but you know what I mean?
It's like seriously, not literally, and it turned out we should have taken him seriously and literally.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. But yeah, anyway, they see him as some sort of, he's a flawed character, but hey, he's like in people in the Bible. There was a Bible story where King whatever was David, right? Exactly, was the
Yeah.
So.
And this is apropos your point about my fellow Jewish Americans who are much more religious than me, who are traditional Orthodox or Hasidim. Many of these communities support Trump for the same reason that evangelicals do, because he's catering to a certain fundamentalist view of things, and catering to projects that their fundamentalism links them to, such as the settler movement in Israel or in the United States, various Christian nationalism, essentially, and certain positions on abortion, certain positions on LGBTQ rights, etc.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Speaking of other concerning situations in the world, the UK election didn't go so great for anyone except for the Tories. And it went great for Vladimir Putin because he really doesn't like the United Kingdom, and this is probably it for that. And, Scotland's probably going to leave for sure since they voted for it like 3 times in a row. So that's what he wants. He wants to break up the things and get everyone back to their little fiefdoms and, no more NATO and no more, all the European Union, whatever, like United Kingdom, anything to break up, anything to encourage the nationalism, anything to make it the little states warring against each other, vying for, whatever.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the international structures are threatening because they're threatening to oil companies, because you could have regulatory agreements that seek, like the Paris Climate Exchange Accord, that seek to protect the earth. But if everyone is in their nationalist enclave, then international regulatory environmental agreements are not going to be efficacious. There's going to be no block on the way that Russia makes its money, which is via oil.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. But how because it seems frustrating from over here, because you see in 2016. You're very good at identifying the problem, and I don't mean to put you on the spot about finding solutions, but I'd like to try to find some solutions. So I'm a little bit I don't know what to do next. I see this as a problem, and in 2016 Hillary Clinton ran. She was centrist, and she won, but she lost, whatever. And then Jeremy Corbyn was a radical, and he was left wing, and he lost even worse. So it's like, okay, well, which one works? Like, what do you do? I'll go with either, whatever.
I mean, I think we're all guessing to some extent. We can't. I think Corbyn was dislikable, and Hillary Clinton was not very likable. I mean, she did not run a campaign. I think Hillary Clinton is likable, but her campaign was not likable. She did not seem.
No.
It did not seem like it was a well-run campaign. I think Corbyn ran a terrible campaign. There was a lot of people who just viscerally disliked him. It's hard for me to know, not having been in the UK. It's hard for me to assess what happened with anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but it's hard for me not to think that there wasn't a kind of, I mean, Corbyn. Some people get obsessed with Israel excessively over and above obsession with other human rights situations in the world. I think that's a problematic sign, and maybe that was present in the UK Labour Party. There's been enough Jewish people who have said that anti-Semitism was a problem for me to think it was, but I don't see how that possibly could be used against Bernie Sanders. Or they're going to try Ted Cruz, who associates with anti-Semites all the time. I mean, he's pictures of him with John Hagee, and certainly he's right-wing anti-Semites are not unfamiliar to him. I'm not suggesting he's an anti-Semite, but Ted Cruz tweeted today linking Corbyn and Sanders because of Sanders' support from people like Ilhan Omar or Linda Saussure. So you're going to see that used as a strategy against the Democratic Party. I suspect whoever they run, that they're insufficiently pro-Israel, something like that, and then that will be represented as anti-Semitism. So there's going to be propaganda campaigns. I think whatever happened in the UK, there was, I'm sure, legitimate charges of anti-Semitism against the Labour Party, but it was also much exaggerated. To the point where, I went to London a few weeks ago and thought that I was going to be in danger for some reason, or being targeted on the streets. But, that's not, I think the UK is still a safe place to be Jewish. So, there seems to be.
Well, put that on a billboard. That's a vote of confidence right there. I think. Well,
so. I couldn't, as an American, judge exactly what was happening.
That's a good point.
My Jewish friends in the UK tended to be Labour supporters, or certainly not going to vote. But there was a lot of antipathy towards Corbyn himself. I don't see. Bernie Sanders is one of the most liked politicians in the United States. He has strong favorability even among people who don't support him. So it's not really clear to me that there is really a moral to be taken other than make sure the person you elect, can run a campaign that's better than the one Clinton ran in 2016 and much better than the one Corbyn ran.
Yeah. It's just kind of amazing that what would be the first Jewish presidential candidate of a major party gets accused of anti-Semitism. What are the odds? What darn the luck?
Well, it's a very dark time in Jewish American history, I think, right now. It's a dark time because what's happening is you're seeing a war between Jewish people. The same mechanisms that were used to attack those who supported BDS, and I do not support BDS, but I recognize it as a legitimate political tactic that people can argue for. So the same tactics that were used to attack them are now being aimed at progressive Jews. So there's a lot of progressive Jews out there who are being accused of anti-Semitism. And with some of the same tropes that you found, frankly, in documents like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, where left-wing Jews are being accused of hiding anti-Semitism, hiding illiberal aims behind the mask of social justice. So, it's a really bad thing there's always been this stress fracture between communities of Jews dating back thousands of years. So-called Hellenistic Jews were the ones who always were supposed to have favored assimilating, favored the ones who would subjugate Jews, the empire, as it were. And there's always been this tension between one group of Jews, one group of us who said we shouldn't assimilate, and another group of us who said we should assimilate. And what you're seeing is right now you're seeing a finely honed apparatus aimed at progressive Jews like myself, who are raising our kids in Hebrew school and everything, and we're being represented as anti-Semitic because we say, Ilhan Omar is great and deny that she's an anti-Semite.
But you don't consider BDS to be a inherently anti-Semitic enterprise. I
do not consider BDS to be an inherently anti-Semitic enterprise.
Right.
For God's sakes, Judith Butler is pro-BDS. I mean, she's a Jewish woman who teaches, and again, I'm not pro-BDS, but I'm sure there are anti-Semites who are pro-BDS. I'm sure that's the case. But there are also people who are deeply concerned about Israel and its soul and heart, who think that pressure should be brought to stop illegal settlements, to stop practices that are not in the best interests of Israel's future. And I disagree that BDS is a good tactic to use for that. I don't think that academic boycotts are the way to go. But there's certain it's also a very broad spectrum. I mean, what about boycotting just the companies that sell equipment to movements to build illegal settlements? I mean, that seems to be much less problematic than academic boycotts or general boycotts. So there's a lot of different things that could be protested in a nonviolent civil way, and BDS and companies, all of those encompasses a lot of those, and some of which are unquestioningly legitimate.
Yeah.
So it's more like scare words. And there are many Jewish people, many prominent Jewish people who are supporters of BDS in academia and elsewhere. It's to declare them all anti-Semitic seems anti-Semitism is targeting Jews, and so if it turns out that the most prominent American anti-Semites are Jews, then that's weird.
Yeah, very, very strange.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just frustrating. It's people setting the terms of debate, and it's almost like there's projection because like these people wink and nod. I'm talking about the Trump people. They wink and nod at anti-Semites, and then they act like they're against anti-Semitism. It's like, but they're playing both sides of the fence here, in a lot of ways, and it's very upsetting to see.
And frankly, it's not good for Jewish Americans to have our identity politicized in this way. It's never been good historically. It wasn't good in France in the late 19th century when you had Dreyfus parties whose entire mission centered around the charges of anti-Semitism, pro-Dreyfus and anti-Dreyfus parties. It's never been good for Jewish people in a country when their identity is politicized in this way. And it makes me worried about my fellow Jewish Americans and their safety. We're getting real confusion around this phrase "against the state of Israel." There's a lot of propaganda surrounding it, and that needs to be unpacked. Now, so people try to mess around with that. They'll say they want to eradicate the state of Israel, and my response is, well, if anyone wants to kill Jewish people, that's anti-Semitic, and they should be stopped, and that would be terrible to kill. But sometimes what they mean is people, by eradicating the state of Israel, they mean something like there can be no binational state, a one-state solution where Palestinians and there are Palestinian Israeli citizens and Jewish and non-Palestinian Jewish citizens. I mean, there are now, but a one-state solution that incorporates everyone would be eradicating the state of Israel. Or I mean, they certainly mean that, or a solution that says, as many original Zionists wanted, that Israel is not a Jewish state but a secular liberal state. That was the vision of many original Zionists, and that vision is sometimes described as eradicating the Jewish state, or being against Israel. And that's where there's a lot of linguistic confusion. They try to Netanyahu is very skilled at that. They try to represent something that is against a certain nationalist version of Israel as some kind of proto-genocide of Jewish people in Israel. And that's what you have to attend to. A lot of Americans who don't understand the situation understand by eradicating the state of Israel, understand by being against the state of Israel, something that would involve violence or something that would be illiberal, whereas actually what some people mean is just making it into a secular liberal democracy.
Mm-hmm. But it's like, I mean, in a certain way, I understand why people are wary of people criticizing Israel, because it's like, after you've gone this long without having a home, it's like finally you got something, and, maybe there's problems, okay, but like this is the first time ever that we've gotten a place of our own, really, like in recent memory, and it's a big deal, and they are on attack from all sides in certain ways militarily, but at the same time, it's like you should be able to question any government. It should be.
I'm an American, and you should be able to question any government.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are different groups that have legitimate claims on the same pieces of land, and that's going to be complicated.
Especially if you say there only one of them can win, like only one can be here at the end, and it's like, well, okay, what do you do with the other ones?
Exactly. That's where it gets frightening, and it's not good for the security of Israel to go down a certain route that represents the situation as unsolvable and Palestinians as somehow beyond the pale. I mean, if I can walk into Berlin, where my family's property was stolen and their glorious houses and apartments in Charlottenburg taken away, if I can walk into Berlin and look at my great-grandfather's apartment and be happy and enjoy my time in Germany, then Palestinians whose houses and property were stolen from them, if they were given full rights and could also feel positively. It's not like Palestinians are different than other people, and so that's what I'm concerned with. The situation is that Palestinians are represented in this deeply problematic and really, from the perspective of someone worried about violence against them, that's already, of course, happening and has been happening, a deeply problematic way. Right. I mean, all of this, but that's the complex politics over there. As far as Americans are concerned, Americans should be allowed to discuss the politics of any nation and take any stand. I'm in agreement that people who focus obsessively on Israel and don't pay attention to what's happening in India are probably might be accused of anti-Semitism legitimately, but it's obviously there's serious problems with the politics and policies of the state of Israel, and if you can't talk about that, that's a problem.
Yeah, and it's super upsetting to see it come from people that are always harping on about free speech and why isn't there free speech on campus anymore, people, and it's like, well, okay, is there free speech on campus for everyone, really, about this too?
On campus around if you're pushing for Palestinian rights and Palestinian pushing back against the human rights disaster really facing Palestinians. So it's problematic, and I would even delicately choose my words because it's a very problematic speech situation, and now it's being weaponized. This issue where people who do speak about it, like Ilhan Omar and Linda Saussure, who is, for God's sakes, Palestinian American, and so should have every right to speak about her perspective. As a Jewish American, I don't begrudge anyone speaking about their perspective. And so she has every right to talk about how she sees things. So they get then attacked just for, raising positions which, while I might not agree with them, are part of, and someone who's Palestinian American should not be accused of anti-Semitism whenever they say, I have relatives who are being mistreated.
Well, I mean, it was a tactic that was used in other cases too. I mean, when there was apartheid in South Africa, I mean, there was that whole song that little Stevie did, "You're going to play Sun City," they put it on the line there. They said, "We're not going to support this with our money." And I don't know. I mean, isn't that the free market speaking? Aren't you supposed to talk with your wallet in that capitalism or whatever?
That's why BDS. I mean, again, what is BDS? I mean, there are companies that sell their equipment or supply equipment to destroy Palestinian villages to make way for illegal settlements. It should be perfectly reasonable to ask universities to divest from those companies for the same reason that we saw around South Africa. But then you get to more extreme versions of BDS, where you're talking about not participating in academic events or academic exchanges, boycotting institutions that are not involved in Palestinian oppression. And there, I disagree. I don't think that's a way that's an effective or legitimate strategy. But to criminalize it and to criminalize support for it, that goes beyond my understanding of what it is to be American. I mean, I'm an American. At the core of what's great about our country is freedom. The freedom to express yourself being paramount among these freedoms. So now you can say, okay, these contracts that you signed or Title VI violations on campus, these don't make the acts illegal. They make them punishable, or you're free not to sign the contract. But we're talking about, we're not the kind of speech we're talking about that if I were Palestinian American and I would be criticizing Israel, I might be criticizing some of Israel's actions. This is not, and considering various tactics to bring to bear to support my own relatives. This is political speech, and the core of the First Amendment protects political speech. So the idea that in the United States, I can understand why, certain kinds of non-political speech might be, libel. We don't allow libel, but this is political speech to decide, to adjudicate strategies for pressuring other nations. That's political speech, and the idea that would be restricted by universities or by employers, well, that seems just anti-freedom to me.
Yeah, well, that's another reason I wanted to talk to you is I'm kind of interested in to see how you're going to go forward, because I think that the danger I see is not that you're going to say the wrong thing necessarily, is that you're going to say something you should say something and you won't, because you'll stop yourself. You'll self-censor yourself because you don't want to be accused of being in the wrong here. And now that the rules have changed a little bit, or seem to have. That's what upsets me, is like, oh, well, now we can't hear that perspective because people are going to be not wanting to say it legitimately because there's a chilling effect.
Right, as Timothy Snyder says in On Tyranny, I think the first rule is don't obey in advance.
Yeah, that's a great book. I really like that one.
Yeah, so there's my views on Israel are, not fairly standard Labor Party Israeli views in Israel. I mean, I think Israel should be a liberal, secular liberal democracy. There should be some kind of two-state solution that's legitimately beneficial and safe for both parties. When you have someone like me being attacked, for not being sufficiently pro-Israel, I don't know what's meant there by pro-Israel. And more than that, since my politics is focused in the United States, I don't think that my identity should be politicized. It's very whenever you have a group whose identity is politicized like this, it becomes like part and parcel of the politics. America was always distinct in that Jews had a presence. We had a presence here, and we didn't enter the politics in this way. So yeah, but right. I mean, one of the problems here is that this synergy between nationalisms. This is what we're facing worldwide. We're facing this synergy between nationalism. So Christian nationalists who are no friend of American Jews because they think America is a Christian nation, they suddenly partner up with right-wingers in Israel who say that, who claim that Israel has to be that non-Jews should be second-class citizens in Israel. This is and they partner up with Hindu ultranationalists who say Muslims should be second-class citizens in India. They're even calling some of the Hindu nationalists even call for India to be a Hindu Zion. So, and of course, Christian nationalists in America think of America as a kind of Christian Zion. So this ultranationalism that is more and more, as you pointed out earlier in the conversation, starting to have fundamentalism at its base, which is something a little bit missing from the fascism narrative. I tend to tell that I think is the problem, is a serious problem going forward in our world, especially as the problems in our world become ever more complex and ever more international. To look inward and to look towards a fundamentalist religious base that wants us to return to traditions that are not going to allow us to solve these global problems, that's just going to augur disaster in the future.
This is a little bit off topic, but I've known a couple people that were Jewish and then actually moved back to Israel and literally joined the army, and now they're never going to not be super pro-Israel now, because it's like you've moved to a place and you joined the and it's compulsory if you're a certain age, right? I mean, if you have to join the military if you're of a certain age group in Israel, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I mean, hopefully that keeps the IDF less. I mean, to have a civilian army can be important for the morality of the army, but yeah, that's why. I think that I mean, what you say is right, but we're spending a lot of time talking about the politics of another nation because it's entered our American politics. I mean, there's a crisis in Israel. They have a far right government. They have a far right government that is corrupt. Netanyahu has been accused of corruption and a number of different acts, and their far right government is linked to our far right government, which is linked to far right governments around the world. And of course, what you see in Israel is that they're taking anti-Semitic, fascist, quasi-fascist leaders like Viktor Orban and venerating them and treating them with great reverence and. These are people who have run anti-Semitic political campaigns. So it's this ultranationalism that's running through the world, linked to fundamentalism, with the backing of oil companies and oligarchs who see international frameworks as a threat.
Yeah, but what are you doing for the holidays?
I'm probably grading papers.
I should have known.
I will certainly be grading papers, like I do every holidays. That's what I. Hanukkah. We're gonna have we'll have a Hanukkah with the kids, which is nice.
Oh, nice.
They'll be home from school this year, and so I'll have to get. And I will be. My wife is a cardiologist, so.
Oh wow.
Working through the holidays, so I will be home alone with the kids. And so I want to get them presents that will entertain us all. And so maybe, I don't know, board games. I don't know. I still have to figure that out, and Hanukkah is impending. But maybe we'll go to New York City. But, being married to a cardiologist is restrictive in a number of ways. What are you doing for the holidays?
Yeah. Oh, as little as possible. My wife and I just do. We don't go anywhere. We've already gone to certain people's houses. We'll go to other people's houses later, but holidays are usually just reserved for locking the doors to our house. But So any music you want to recommend? You've been listening to lately?
No, I haven't been listening to any music.
Nothing.
I don't listen to music.
Wow, really? Do you not read and listen to music at all?
Never.
Or you need silence. You probably get more reading done than me. That's true. That would probably help me concentrate.
I used to listen to a lot of punk rock and hip hop, but I haven't been listening to music. I've just been essentially I spend a lot of time with my children and my family, and otherwise I've been working, which is something when you're with a cardiologist, you can see that you learn a lot about work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you're always on call, right? Pretty much. I mean, any time can be go time, I assume.
And we have a rich circle of friends here, including Tim Snyder, for instance. And
man, tell him to come on the podcast. I would love to have him on the podcast. He's great. On Tyranny was fantastic. I'm reading Road to Unfreedom right now. Oh my gosh, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, How Fascism Works was deeply influenced by conversations with him and his partner, his wife, Marcy Shore, who helped me with the material on the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I remember one time I ran into Marcy Shore, like in 2016 on campus, and she said, "Are you teaching the Protocols this semester?" I said, "I am," and she said, "So am I. I should teach it." So yeah, we have very close. We're blessed to have an incredible community of moral activists and friends here who are involved in this struggle to do something about the crisis caused by the attack on immigrants. And so I assume we'll be taking our kids to various protests in the next few weeks, as we usually do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tomorrow is the impeachment protest to take them to.
That's right. That is tomorrow. Yeah, those are happening all over for sure. But yeah, well, I mean, we talk about scary stuff whenever we talk, but I feel like it's good because you have to be able to identify things. You can't effectively face something unless you understand it, and if it's mentionable, it's manageable. It's like you can say it out loud. That's what I liked about, your book's great, don't get me wrong, but I don't mean to come back to Timothy Snyder again, but in that book, on tyranny, it felt like, okay, like, yes, it's really serious, but you're not powerless. You have things you can do in your life. That's why one of my favorite parts of that book were where he said, you got to keep reading. Here's some things you could read. Don't stop. Don't let them take, that thing from you. And it's like, yeah, there's no reason you should stop living your life,
Well, Tim Snyder urges in that book action, material action.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think you see the protesters in Hong Kong quoting his book all over where you see people taking the streets. They quote that book. That book is about what to do. My work is so much analysis, as is his Road to Freedom. So How Fascism Works is not about what to do. It's about It's about what we face. And also Tim Snyder's On Tyranny, though. It's a great work, but it has a little bit of a problem in the United States, in the context of the United States. So one of my favorite questions I ever asked was when he was giving a talk and he was talking about the advice and take care of the face of the world. He says, if you see a swastika, take it down. And I raised my hand and I said, what if you walk by a Confederate monument? In other words, he's writing from a European perspective that assumes that icons of hatred and racial exploitation are not official symbols.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and those monuments were put up 75 years after the Civil War was over anyway. It was just to reinforce Jim Crow, and it was paid for by this one league of the South that did 700 of them in a 15-year period at the turn of the century.
Right. That's right. But it's obviously part of...
It's endorsed by the state,
it's
for sure.
It's endorsed by the state. And so it's much different than dealing with a situation in Europe where neo-Nazis, skinheads have placed swastikas on a wall. The United States itself has this lengthy, problematic history. And it's embedded into our institutions. And what we've learned from the past few years, many of us didn't need to learn it, but what more of us have learned over the past few years is that if we're going to prevent the kind of ultranationalist, white Christian fundamentalist movement that we're witnessing from gathering more steam, we have to go back and tackle our past in a frank manner that our education system has frankly failed to do.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was trying to end on a fun note. I think we've just veered back into the same old territory. But hey, what about your new book? I know you're writing another book. Is that coming out soon?
Yeah, my co-author is coming tomorrow to work with me.
Neat.
That's a book I've been working on for many years, 4 years, with David Beaver, director of the Cognitive Science program at University of Texas at Austin, and a linguist. We published one piece in the New York Times called Beware of Snakes, Invaders, and Other Dangerous Words. And this book is about political rhetoric. It's called Hustle, The Politics of Language. And it's a large academic work addressing the question of how rhetoric leads to violence, what the causal mechanisms are that begin with calling people termites and snakes and end with taking their children away, separating their families, throwing them into prison, detaining, murdering, raping, or other forms of or deporting them. So what we're trying to do is sit down and look at the psychology, look at the linguistics, and figure out the causal mechanisms involved between rhetoric and action.
How is it working with a co-author?
Oh, well, we've both been giving the material in academic departments. This is quite technical work at times. And we've been giving the material all over the world, really. And it would be great if the University of Texas at Austin were not so far away. But an academic book takes many years. It takes a lot of hard, intense work. It's been, frankly, taking me away from writing editorials in the newspapers more than I would like. But it's good. It's good. I think it'll take us another year and a half to finish it, and then after that, we will use it as the basis for a lot of articles in the newspaper, media appearances, and a trade book.
That's really cool. Yeah. I just think I like working with other authors. Actually, I've had the chance to do it sometimes, and it's fun to be able to just pass things back and forth. And it's like a snowball; it gets a little bit bigger each time. And
exactly.
One person adds something, and you add something, and then they pass it back, and it's shaved down and it's compacted. And it's nice to see it take shape. To use another analogy, like clay or whatever. But it's interesting.
It's this very it's a daunting empirical question, and I felt, though I have a strong background as a linguist, the person I'm working with is the world's foremost person on some of the phenomena we're looking at, like presupposition. Like if I say to you, what's your solution to the Jewish question? That is anti-Semitic. But why is that anti-Semitic? Because it presupposes that there is a Jewish question.
Yeah, I was going to say the Jewish question sounds sinister.
Right. It traps you. It's an anti-Semitic trap because it traps you into thinking that there is a Jewish question.
Right.
So, and that trap is called presupposition. We see that kind of trap all the time in innocuous ways. Like in my gym, there's a sign that says, "Thank you for cleaning your machine after use." So we see the phenomenon of presupposition all the time, these traps. And that's enough. It's telling us, it's presupposing that we've cleaned our machine, and if we haven't, we feel embarrassed. And so what's presupposed is what we ought to think. And so language has this mechanism for telling us something, but you can only get the message if you presuppose something else. And a lot of political speech involves that. It involves that move of getting your interlocutor to presuppose something. And really what you want is you want them to presuppose that. You don't really care about your explicit message. So at any rate, he's the world's expert on that. It's a daunting technical problem, empirical problem. Like, people say, how can language be violent? How can language do anything? It's just talking. There's an empirical question there. How does language enable people to do terrible things? And so I just don't think one mind working full time is enough to tackle that huge problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like when people say, "When did you stop beating your wife?" or whatever.
That's a classic example of presupposition.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well, great. Well, I will definitely look forward to reading all that, and keep doing what you're doing. I think you're sounding the alarm bells on things that need to be sounded. I apologize if I said anything wrong about Israel or the Jewish people in any way. No offense was intended, and don't executive order me or whatever.
No, you didn't. It's a complicated topic that requires and people should be allowed to say, I'm ignorant about a lot of things about Israel because I'm an American citizen and I don't, frankly, at the center of my thought all the time. I'm a U.S. citizen. But unfortunately, the situation's being politicized. So in America, in ways, not unfortunately, it is anyway because the United States has been supporting Israel militarily to the tune of over between $3 and $4 billion a year for a long time. So it's already a political question. So people, but there's two different issues. Whether obviously it's always a political question what our relation to any other country would be. That's always a political question. So it's always a political question what relations to Israel or France or Belgium should be. But what is should be less of a political question is how this relates to anti-Semitism in America. It should be off limits that that Palestinians are being called anti-Semitic. Palestinian Americans my fellow American citizens are being called anti-Semitic because they're just, they're engaging in legitimate political critique. Maybe they're wrong, maybe they're right, but they're engaging in legitimate political discussions. And this is what we, I think as Americans, we don't need to solve all the problems of the Middle East, but we can make sure that people are allowed to discuss them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's important to remember that there's so many perspectives within the Jewish community, and no one group speaks for everyone. And
speaks for everyone, especially not. There's always going to be tensions between and always have been between liberal Jews and very religious or very there are liberal Zionists, but there's always been tensions between more religious Jews and more liberal Jews, and more secular Jews. Of course, there's always been tensions. Two Jews, three opinions. So
yeah, that's the phrase I was trying to think of. Yeah.
What's happening that's extremely disturbing is one group of Jewish people is trying to speak for all of us, and that's problematic, and people should not. And more than that, it just shouldn't be a part of American politics. It's not good for the Jews.
Oh yeah. Yeah, right. We probably shouldn't be spending this much time even talking about it. But yeah, reminds me of on The Sopranos when they had that episode where they were talking about Christopher Columbus. And Furio, who is from Italy, but I never liked Columbus. And then all the American Italians are like, oh, and they're like, but why? It's like he's from the north, and we hate the people from the north, and he have all the money, and they look down on the people from Sicily or whatever. And it's like they don't even realize that they're over here. These American Italians, like they have a totally different perspective. So it's just like Christopher Columbus equals Italy, and they're like within Italy, it's like, pooh, I spit on the ground at Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, yeah, well, I've taken up a lot of your night, and thank you so much for being so generous with your time. And yeah, I hope to talk to you again soon. Hopefully we'll have something more fun to talk about.
Yeah, let's hope. From your lips to God's ears.
Exactly.
All
well,
right.
Have a good one. I'll talk to you
soon.
soon.
Have a wonderful holiday season.
Same to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Join the Rob Burgess Show mailing list. Go to tinyletter.com/The Rob Burgess Show and type in your email address. then respond to the automatic message. Also, please make sure to comment, follow, like, subscribe, share, rate, and review everywhere the podcast is available, including iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Twitter, Internet Archive, TuneIn, RSS, and now Spotify. The official website for the podcast is www.therobburgesshow.com. You can find out more about me by visiting my website, www.thisburgess.com. If you have something to say, record a voice memo on your smartphone and send it to therobburgessshow@gmail.com. Include voice memo in the subject line of the email. Also, if you want to call or text the show for any reason, the number is 317-674-3547. Until next time.